Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Welcome back to the Agents of Innovation podcast. I am your host, Francisco Gonzalez, and we are here at one of my favorite places in the world, not just Antigua, Guatemala, but also Antigua Cigars. So as many of you know me, I am really passionate about Guatemala. I've spent a lot of time here the last 2 years. And when I'm in Antigua, I spend a lot of time right here at Antigua Cigars with these two fine people, Uwe and Lyne, who are the co-owners of Antigua Cigar. Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Well, thank you for having us.
Well,
Thank you.
It's great to finally have you because I've had so many great conversations with you over the last 2 years. I've brought many friends here. Got to give a shout out to our friend Bob Rubin back in Florida. Bob and I actually came here for the first time. I think it was April 2021 when he was visiting me, and I walked in these doors. But you guys just this is what it looks like. It feels like a living room in here.
Thank you. We're very happy to have you and Bob and all your friends.
Well, thank you. And, you know, I am actually smoking today one of the cigars that's your branded cigar, the Antigua Cigars. And so is Lyne. And what are you smoking, Uwe?
Well, I'm smoking a Rocky Patel
That's great.
Edge.
Well, Rocky Patel Edge. Rocky Patel is great. He's got a home in Florida. I once met him, actually, right before I came to Guatemala. Pretty cool guy. But anyway, so Lyne and Uwe, your journey is amazing. And I always tell you every time I'm here, I wish I would have recorded every conversation I ever had with you because I could write a book. So we will only have about an hour today. But I have many hours of listening to all their stories. But Uwe is originally from Germany. Lyne is originally from Quebec in Canada. And they met, though, in Canada.
Yeah.
So let's go back. Uwe, at what time in your life did you move from Germany to Canada?
Well, as a young guy, I always was very interested in geography, and I always wanted to see the world. And I grew up in a very small town north of Hamburg. And so that thought always stuck with me, and it never went away. And I went through the course of apprentice and engineer, and went to engineering school.
By the way, I just want to say that we are in a real working cigar lounge. So what I think we're going to do here, because we didn't want to interrupt the business of Antigua Cigars today, is once in a while you might see what just happened there if you're watching on YouTube. By the way, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you probably have no idea what just happened. But if you're listening and you want to watch on YouTube, just go to Agents of Innovation. Just go to YouTube and type in Agents of Innovation podcast. You'll find us. This is episode 122. And anyway, and if you are watching on YouTube, what you'll see is that Lyne just got up out of the chair over here because, on the other side of the door, people are trying to buy cigars. And we don't want to keep them from buying cigars as we're smoking cigars. So Uwe, for our listeners and viewers, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That is fine. So at the age of 24, I finally decided it's time to go. And with the support of my family, I sold all my belongings and I just bought a plane ticket to America. But I ended up in Canada. So, which is a part of America, just like here, Guatemala is a part of America. And
wait, when you say you bought a ticket to America,
yeah,
I know this United States is one part of the American continent.
Yeah,
but where was your ticket actually to?
Well, it was to Toronto, to Canada. Because as we started out, we didn't have that much money, my buddy and I, and so we decided, well, we go to the American Embassy and see in Hamburg, or it's actually a consulate, if we can get some kind of working papers or something and hang around for a while and discover the country. And those were all our ideas. But we found out that was not that easy in 1974. The United States had a lot of people coming back, and unemployment was there, and from the Vietnam War into that time. And they decided they would give us a 6 months visitor visa. But because our funds were very little, we said, well, we got to work. And so we went outside in Hamburg, and then we saw the Canadian flag. Hey, that is North America too. So we went to the embassy there, or the consulate, and did our same spiel. We would like to go and we like to see. And they said, oh yeah, you can become a landed immigrant. You have to fill out the forms, and then you go through the process, and then you can work there. I said, I don't really want to emigrate at this point. I just wanted to see the world a little bit. And they said, well, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, but you have the opportunity. So that's what we did, and we applied, and about 4 months later we had an interview and we got the go-ahead to go, and so we bought the ticket for Toronto.
So you went to Toronto. Where did life take you from Toronto? And it sounds like you didn't just stay for 6 months.
That's correct. That's correct. The intention was to stay for a while, and we were in Toronto for a while, and then kind of funds went low, and we had to find a job, and we worked at a hockey camp. My buddy was a professional cook, and so we took the job there for 2 months, and had to do all the cooking for the boys that did the summer camp. And
Still in Toronto?
It was outside Toronto. It was actually the second largest hockey camp after Bobby Orr's in the States. And anyways, so throughout the time we met the coaches, and one of the coaches was professional from the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he came one late in the season and said, hey, what you guys are doing after you're finished here? And I said, well, we want to see the country. He said, listen, I was traded to the Vancouver Canucks. And
Vancouver?
Yep, Vancouver, other side of the country. And
beautiful city.
And he said, listen, my car gets shipped and I fly, and with the car we have 2 seat tickets. Here they are. You get the seat tickets, enjoy them, travel free to Vancouver.
By rail?
By rail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 4 days, 3 nights, and that's what we did. And we met him over there and stuff, and then we hung out in Vancouver for a while, and then funds went low again. Where do we go? And we always liked horses, and people told us, go to Alberta. Alberta is a ranch country. They have all the horses in the ranches. You can get a job. So we went to Calgary, and that took us to the racetrack, and we worked at the racetrack for a while. Made some money again, stayed the winter, looked after the horses at the stable. And there was also a riding facility and arena, and there was a lot of young girls riding, and we had some connections, and my connections became my first wife. And that made me stay in Calgary.
Well, that's a wonderful story. So Calgary, and this is for those of us, especially for people like me in the U.S. I've never been to Calgary, but I know not far from there is Banff National Park,
the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, so it's beautiful. Maybe let me, I hate to just, if I have to make a comparison, would it be something like between kind of Texas and Colorado? Something kind of.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of like Calgary is at the same height like Denver. And there's a lot of connection between
more
that.
like that.
And very similar, yeah.
I've seen some pictures. Beautiful country out there. So that's great. So what kind of work did you get into for most of your career, most of your life?
Well, over the time there was all kinds of things, and being I think I could say self-motivated. I found a job relatively fast, but I didn't get into engineering. Like I studied mechanical engineering, and so I got into a few other things we did,
And that's not
Another
the buzzer.
customer.
Yeah, another customer. As you can see, it's actually pretty early here at Antigua Cigars, but we're still getting customers in here.
Yes,
And,
yes.
Anyway, it's a great place. But go ahead.
And so then I was able to get a job where in sales, and I did relatively well. I saved some money, and there was a small company for sale. And of course, I wanted to be my own boss, so I bought the little company for $40,000 in 1980, and I had that one until '88, and then I sold the company, and I got into the clothing business. I bought a clothing company, a small one, work clothes. We manufactured mainly work clothes, like coveralls for the oil industry and kitchenware and stuff like that. And then other people were interested, and we got some financial partners, and the company grew to a fairly sizable business. And we had 2 factories going, and I liked the engineering part of it. I was setting up the production and the facilities and everything. And then in 2000, things happened. Over the time, I was divorced. I have 3 wonderful sons that are still living in Canada and have their families there, and they are now grown up in their 40s, and so it was time again that I wanted to see other parts of the world again, because boys were on their own, I was on my own, and I opened up a consultant firm for improvement of engineering of the production facilities in the garment industry. And through that I was in the association, and there was a governing body that drew people from every province. And one day in '99, the meeting was back in Toronto, and it took me to Toronto. And there was a representation of every province. And who walked into the room is my present lovely wife, Lyne.
Hi.
So, hello, Lynn. So, Lynn, before we go back to that moment where you met, let's get Lynn's background, her story. She grew up in Quebec, a province of Canada. What particular city?
Quebec City.
Quebec City. Beautiful city.
Yes.
I've only been there for a half a day.
Oh, God.
I was on a cruise in 2019, and we started the cruise in Montreal, and it went to Quebec City, it went to Prince Edward Island, it went Halifax, I think Port Charlotte, is that the name of the city? Something Charlotte.
Could be.
So it went around there, and then it ended up in Bar Harbor, Maine, and we got off in Boston.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I think it was on
Princess?
Holland, America, maybe?
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
Could be. Yeah.
One of the best cruises, especially in terms of the port experiences.
Yes.
And I'd never been to all of those parts of Canada. I've been to Toronto, I've been to Vancouver, I've even been to Windsor on the other side of Detroit.
Yeah.
But never had been to Niagara Falls. But all those places, and I was really excited for Montreal and Quebec City. I actually got to Montreal a couple days ahead of the cruise, explored it, love it. You know what? I have not made this announcement before this actual interview, but by the time this interview comes out, I will have made the announcement that the Fearless Journeys community is going to take a trip to Montreal.
Oh, really?
In this summer.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to do that. So if you're interested in coming to Montreal, and we're thinking about a side trip to Quebec City, I'm gauging the interest in that. I want to do it, but I know I got to see what people's time is like. But late June, early July, we're going to time it with the Montreal Jazz Festival.
Oh, my God.
And my friend Dan Weinberg, who actually grew up, I believe, in Alberta, he now lives in Montreal, and he's actually been to Guatemala with me. Unfortunately, you guys were not here during that trip. He was our first Fearless Journeys group trip to Guatemala. But he's a huge YouTube guy. He has something like 230,000 followers on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
He's been to many, many countries. He loves Guatemala. And anyway, but he lives in Montreal. He's done a lot of great Montreal videos. But he's going to be with us during that trip, so people can come connect with Dan as well. So it's going to be a really fun trip. But my first time going to Montreal was on that cruise, and we stopped for the day in Quebec City. I went out to a lovely cathedral in the countryside. It's like like
Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré. No, in Montreal or
no, Quebec City.
In Quebec City.
It's a huge basilica.
Yeah, that's Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré.
Yeah, really cool. So anyway, but if you're just in the little center of Quebec City, beautiful. It's charming.
Yes.
And I got to give one small anecdote. So I was working for National Review Institute at the time. We were actually on a cruise that they do. National Review does a cruise every year, and this was the year they chose to do it. So I was actually being paid to be on this cruise. Even better.
Even better, yeah.
One of the writers, Charlie Cook, he's originally from England. He now lives in Florida. Perhaps a bigger Disney fan than even me. And I grew up going to Disney my whole life. So 2004, I'm with my brother. We're in Venice. We walk into San Marcos Plaza.
Yeah.
And I look, and the first words out of my mouth were, "Oh, it's like Epcot." Right? And then in 2013, my brother and I are in China. And we're in Beijing, and we see the temple. We go to the Temple of Heaven, and the first words out of my mouth are, "Oh my God, it's like Epcot," because Epcot has like a replica of some of these things in these countries. And my brother looked at me when we were in China. He goes, "If you do that again, I'm not traveling with you ever again." So I say that because 2019, I'm in Quebec City. We walk into the plaza. I'm with Charlie Cook of National Review, and the words out of his mouth were, "Oh, now I get Epcot." Because when you go to Epcot and you're going around the World Showcase and you go to Canada, great steakhouse there, by the way, at the Epcot Canada experience, the architecture they use at Epcot is exactly from Quebec City. Maybe there's even a little Montreal influence. But if you go to Toronto or Vancouver
You don't
or whatever,
see it.
and then you go to Epcot Canada, you're like, what's this? So for you French Canadians,
Yeah.
you should know that really Epcot is representing French Canada.
Mostly.
So yes, mostly
Okay.
for the most part.
Interesting.
So I thought it was. But anyway, when Charlie Cook said those words, I said it wasn't me this time. So anyway, back to you, Lyne, Quebec City, beautiful
Yeah.
place. Tell us a little bit about your early life growing up in Quebec City.
I was born on the island of Orleans, which is in the St. Lawrence River, just right at the junction of Quebec, which means in a native language, the narrowest part of the river. So my grandparents were farmer. We had a maple syrup farm. And I grew up in an environment where I had 5 uncles, 3 aunts. And my father's side of the family, my grandfather was a carpenter. So it was very rural Canada, the living I had. My mother was making our clothes. My grandmother cooked a lot. So it was really very, very family-oriented things. So when I grew up, I decided I didn't want to live in an environment where everybody knew my name and I was known, because my father also had a big business and he was successful. So we were in the spotlight and I wanted to be incognito. I just wanted to evade all of this. Yes, be me. So I ended up later on I worked for, first of all, I worked for a technology company. I was an application specialist in the late 80s when Macintosh, or Apple now, started up with their computer to do graphic design. So I was teaching people on how to do graphic design, which was very interesting because I was not technologically inclined, but they said, we can train you. I spoke French and English. That was good enough for them. So I got a job. I worked for them for a few years, and then that stopped because they were acquired by another German company. And then the company...
Germans, huh?
Yeah, they're everywhere. So I ended up leaving the company, and I decided to reorient my career, and I went in the fashion industry just because I liked it. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I got into this program, and I was trained to work in production, fashion production, which led me to work for a fashion school where they had an office of consulting, and I got very quickly in managing project because I had a lot of technology knowledge, and I was bilingual, so I could speak with the government and the owner of business, which at the time mostly Jewish. and English speaking, mostly English speaking. So I got to do all of that, and then eventually I became a lobbyist to work with the government and the business owner about the laws that manage the industry, mostly training laws and pay laws and all of that. And I worked with the union. So I had a wide array of things that I was doing. And then in 99, I ended up in Montreal, in Toronto, for that board meeting. It was a board, the Canadian board that I was on for 3 years. They did a survey across the country. How's the fashion industry in the country? So I collaborated with them to write this report, and we ended up presenting the report in Toronto, and this is where I met Uwe over a cigar.
So yeah, I've heard this story before. So it's funny because tell me exactly, Uwe, how this knowledge of the cigar conversation came about when you were at this meeting in Toronto, sort of a conference.
Yes.
That was a conference, and there was representation from every province, and I represented Alberta. And my buddy from Winnipeg, he was there too, representing Manitoba. And both of us are cigar smokers. I smoke cigars now for about 47 years. And anyways,
still alive, still kicking, still doing well. 47 years. Mom and Dad, if you're watching, listening, I just want you to know that.
So cigars kind of was always an interest to me, because it was such a cool thing when you had a stressful day and you sat back in a chair and smoked a cigar. Your mind wandered into other ways than thinking about work or anything like that. You were relaxing, and it is. I felt it was good for me. So, anyways, the conference is finished. We are back in the hotel, and it's time to go for dinner. And Robert and I, we go downstairs, and there's 5 other women down there that are representing other provinces. And so, where do we go for dinner, ladies? And they said, oh, you want to come along? Yeah, we want to come along, of course. And so they said, yeah, well, just come with us. We go outside. There's this big black limo sitting there. And they pile into the limo. And we were just about to follow them. They said, no, this is for us. You guys, take a cab and follow us. So, which we did, of course. We didn't want to be chat off, And so we went and come to the restaurant that they selected. And they started, and we get out, and I look across the street, and there's a cigar store. And I said, okay, you guys go in, and I'll just get myself a cigar. And I'm just about walking across the street. I hear this voice behind me. I would want one too. I would like a Romeo and Juliet at Churchill. I look around, and it's Lyne. Lyne wants a cigar.
This young lady over here.
What can you do? Right? Of course, I get that. And so we bought the cigar, we had dinner, and we smoked the cigars together. And that was our first encounter, other than sitting in that big room with 300 other people.
The cigar brought you together. Yeah, that's the story of cigars. It brings so many people together. It brought this couple together, and that was in 99 or something?
Yes, in 99, in spring.
So you meet at this conference, but you live out in Calgary?
Yes.
You live in Montreal. How did this work after the conference?
Well, maybe Lyne can explain.
Well, we are having a long-distance relationship for 3 years. This is not my idea of a good relationship. I'm not evading the emotional contact or whatever it is. So I said, we got to do something. This is not working. I can't do this. So we actually cut it off twice. And the third time he says, no. This is a train ride. You're going to get on the train, and we're going to do this together. I said, okay. So what do we do? Well, we're going to I had to leave my job. I had a big job, and I was happy.
This is you or Uwe?
Me.
You. Okay.
Yeah. what are we going to do? Are we going to live where you live, or are we going to live here? Living in Montreal was not possible. He doesn't speak French, so that would not have worked. And I was not really interested to live in Western Canada. I'm very, very French, and that did not feel like my place. So I said, we have to come up with something else. And Uwe at the time was the president of an association in the US, and they had opened just Central America. So to the membership of that association, exactly. So he decided to attempt to see if he can get a contract, which he did. He got a contract from one of those members of that association, and he came down. He said to me, I got a contract. We're going to El Salvador. Do you want to come? I said, okay, I'm coming. And I said to my dad, I'm moving to El Salvador with Uwe. And he went, okay. Well, he says, it's easier to find a job than to find a husband. So you go ahead. You do it. So I left, not knowing if it was going to work because we had never lived together. So we get this humongous house with lots of room, and we're always sitting on the same sofa in the same room. So we got to change houses, and we always went smaller. And then at one point we said, okay, we're not sure we want to do this consulting thing anymore. We would like to do something else. And what are we going to do? Uwe says, we'll open a cigar shop in Antigua.
So, yeah, before we get to that, so you're in El Salvador roughly
2 years.
2003-ish, 2004?
2002 to 2004. It was a 2-year contract to establish a new garment factory.
And while you're there, my understanding from so many stories over the last 2 years is you were coming over to Antigua from time to time, right? Why did you come here the first time? Why did you keep coming back? How often did you come back?
Well, the work in that factory was a little strenuous because of the temperatures. In springtime, it was well over 40 Celsius all the time. And being a northern person...
I don't even know what that means, Celsius. But
40 Celsius, you are at 94, 95 every day. And as a northern person, and my metabolism had not adjusted, it was too hot. And I said to one of the people I worked with, I said, where do I go with a little cooler? And they said, oh, go to the highlands of Guatemala, go to Antigua. I said, Antigua, I thought there was an island. No, it's a nice old city in the mountains of in Guatemala. And it's called the City of Eternal Spring because it always has the same temperature. The fluctuation is only by about 10-15 degrees in the whole year for the night temperature or the day temperature. Day temperature never goes over 80, and it's beautiful. Okay, so we one day jumped in the truck and drove for 3.5 hours to Antigua. And wow, what a beautiful city, and with all its history, and it was just wonderful. It caught our heart right there, and on top of it, that evening we booked into a hotel and went for a stroll to Central Park for dinner, and there's a crowd gathering in the park, and there's a stage set up in front of the city hall. And there's a grand piano there. And we said, what's this? And so we sat down on the steps of the cathedral, like many other people. And then big speeches came up, and it was for honoring the most known tenor of Guatemala. And he received the Order of the Quetzal, which is the highest order of the country. And that was given that night to him, and they performed a beautiful concert for free in the park. We said, this is a city, this is a town to stay, to be. And so that caught our attention. And then in those 2 years, we came 18 times
Wow. 18 times in 2 years.
Every long week, every month, one long weekend.
Almost 3.5, 4 hour drive each way.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. So your contract then ends in El Salvador after about 2 years there?
Yeah, it ended. And so that's, like Lynn said, we try to decide, are we going back to Canada or do we do something else? And I always had in mind that I would like to do something totally different when I'm 55, because in my working period I met so many people that were working in their jobs. Some were unhappy with them, but they stayed in it because they felt trapped or whatever, for whatever reason they did. But I wanted to be free, and I wanted to do something that I really enjoy. And that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy my engineering job. I loved it. I really loved it. But I always thought there's another part to life. And my number that I had picked as I was about 35, 40 was 55. Whatever money I have at that time, whatever I can cash in, and we will find a place where it will last and where we can have a peaceful life. And that was more important to me than amassing any kind of riches. That was never my main goal. And so we tried to figure out, what do we do? And Lynn said, well, do something where you can grow old with and what you enjoy. I said, well, I enjoy smoking cigars and playing golf. Well, she said, you don't have enough money to get into the golf business. Maybe a driving range, but that's how far it goes. And then the thought was not that bad. I actually investigated how much it would take to set up a driving range with 12 pads. And I had it all calculated out, the prices and everything, except in Antigua, I would not have been able to afford a piece of land that size that is needed. And besides that, the fincas all around Antigua wouldn't give up a piece of land because they're in the coffee business. They're not in the golf business. So that kind of led to the cigar business.
Very nice. So you come here, you move to Antigua, and you had this idea to get into the cigar business here. What was the first steps you took to get into the cigar business?
So, first of all, it's in 6 in the morning. I'm in El Salvador. I woke up. He's not next to me. He never gets up before 10. So there's something going on. So I go in the living room, and he's sitting, and he says, I have a business plan. A business plan for what? For our cigar business in Antigua. I went, okay. So I looked at all of this. I said, yeah, that sounds good. I go back to my office, and then I said, I'll design a logo, because as I said, I was working for Apple in the 80s, so I knew a little bit about graphic arts. So I did the logo that is on our rings now.
This is the same logo?
This is the same logo.
Beautiful logo. I love it.
That's the logo I did. Yeah. So I did that. I put it on a bag, a paper bag, and I come back to him and I said, okay, we can put the cigars in this bag. And he went,
is that the same paper bag you have today?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. I have a lot of those paper bags.
So I said, okay, let's do this. So we figured out that we would have to invest a bit of money to buy the merchandise and all of this. So
And learn more about it.
Yeah, and learn more about the cigars. We're smoking, because I started to smoke. I was 19. I went to Cuba in an all-inclusive. And then this old man is rolling cigars, and he says, do you want to learn how? I said, yes, I'd like that. He says, you come back at 4, and I'm finished my day, and I'll teach you how to smoke. I said, okay.
This is when you were 19 in Cuba?
90 years old.
Wow.
In Cuba, yeah. By myself, traveling by myself.
Havana?
So, no, I was in Veradero.
Veradero. What
Yeah.
part of the country is that? East,
It
west?
would be on the Caribbean side, not on the Atlantic.
The north side, though.
The north side, yeah. So, so I go there, and he teaches me how to smoke. And interestingly enough, he says, you don't have to inhale. I love this. I couldn't inhale anything. I tried the smoking the pots with my friends, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't inhale. I couldn't smoke cigarette. And I said, you're sure I don't inhale? Yeah. So he teach me how to do this, how to light it, to cut it, and to smoke it. And I went, I like this. So I smoked from then on. And then, so we're in El Salvador, and we have to figure out who we're going to buy a cigar from and all of that. And we started to investigate, and and then eventually we bought $5,000 worth of cigars. And the business plan was, if it doesn't work, we'll smoke them all.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. There was no downside, none.
Knew at some point you might probably spend $5,000 in cigars anyway.
Anyway, in the course of my life, yeah.
Right.
It ended up being far more, but this is all good, all good. But Uwe had a great idea that he's going to tell you now how he started this business, because it was not this living room. Hold on.
Well, as we came here on the visits, I fell in love with the Central Park. And there's a lot of people selling all kinds of goodies and handcrafts and everything else. And so I had this idea, I will build a carrito and a good size humidor, 3 glass sides, shelves inside, and I made a design and I had it built. And I had big bicycle wheels on it. It was a beautiful carrito. And we filled it with cigars on the shelves. And I thought, well, I take it in the park. I sit on the park bench, smoke cigars, and see all the tourism go by, and the people who will purchase.
Sounds like
cigars.
a good idea. Somebody could be walking by, see you smoke a cigar. Where'd you get that? I have some right here.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So as we had moved, we built it all, and we moved from Salvador to Antigua. And one of the first Sundays, I loaded my carrito up, and I went to the park, and unloaded, and bye-bye Lyne, and have a good afternoon. And I sit in the park. And, there was some gentleman coming by, and, oh, wow, look at great cigars. And they started purchasing a couple cigars, and they were sitting with me, and we were chatting. And then all of a sudden, we were surrounded by 6 policemen.
Oops.
What's going on? Oops. Yeah, my Spanish was not very good at all. And I heard the words of confiscation and all kinds of, and wow. I better do something about it. And I asked the one guy, hang on to my carrito, don't let go. I go to the coffee shop, I have to phone Lyne. And so I phoned Lyne, you have to come immediately, because Lyne went in Salvador to university and took Spanish the proper way, not like me, because I was working. And so she came very fast, and of course got engaged with the police guys. And what is the problem? Well, you're not indigenous. Only the indigenous can sell in the square and stuff. And you have to have a store, and you have to have a license, and you have to have this. And we confiscate the goods. And Lyne is great at talking, so she kind of engaged in heavy-duty talking with these guys and drew him a little bit away. I grabbed my carrito, went very fast to my truck, loaded the thing up. Lyne, come, let's go. And we took off, and we went home. And then the next day, we started the process of what they decided what we should do.
So it's interesting because right in a moment there, not only was your cigar business going to be done, but Lynn's idea that we were going to at least have $5,000 worth of cigars to smoke for the rest of our lives was going to be gone too.
Yes, exactly. That was
the worst part.
That was the worst part.
Yeah.
So that's why I had to save those.
Also, for those that maybe aren't familiar with Antigua and the Central Park, it's sort of like the Central Plaza. Here, it's a small and it's beautiful, and there's a fountain in the middle, and there's little plants around the sides and everything. But if you come here, there's lots of people selling stuff. They're selling balloons, they're selling ice cream, they're selling weaved material, braided, whatever. Lots more, kind of more like you said, more indigenous type people selling these things. So it probably just looks like you can show up and sell things.
But it doesn't.
That's not the case.
It did not work out for a gringo.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you found your way. Do you want to explain the processes or the steps in what you did kind of next in your cigar business?
Well, the talking with some of the locals, they said, well, you have to incorporate, become an SAA, Sociedad Anónima, to avoid being known. You go Anónima. So, okay, we did that. So we legalized the whole thing, and then we started to look for a location, because as a foreigner, you cannot be selling on the street. At the time, you could not, and still today, you can't sell on the street anymore.
You should mention Maite.
Maite, yeah. When he said earlier that he left, he went to the coffee shop to call me. He went into a coffee shop that was owned by a German family. And now that we have some kind of an emptiness now, we have to find a place. She says, park your stuff here. They can't bug you in here. So we went and stayed there for 3 months, and we started to sell the cigar while we were doing all this process of registration. It is not very difficult. It is more tedious than difficult. And we went through it, and we started it, and so at this time, we were incorporated in September, and we started this whole thing in April. So 4 months later, we were ready to go. And in the meantime, we found a location that will become our location for 15 years. Wow. On a handshake with the owner of the building. So all of it was good. It was very good.
And how long have you been in the present location we're at now?
We moved here during the pandemic in June 2020. Yes. Because in 2018, the people where we were at location for 15 years, they requested that we, I have to go. Uwe will continue the story.
Yeah, Uwe will pause since we got some. I mean, what a perfect timing for somebody to knock on the door.
Yes.
Because they discovered this location just moments ago, and a location you moved to in the middle of the pandemic. And what's really interesting to me, maybe you could tell me if I discovered you or somebody else. The first time I came to Guatemala was in 2019. I was into cigars by then. Not as much as I am now, because it seems like every day that goes by I get more into cigars, but so I could probably say that any given day. But I remember I was with my friend Kyle. He's not a cigar guy, but he knew I was kind of looking for a cigar. And especially when you're like an American and you're maybe abroad and you're looking for a cigar, maybe you're looking for a Cuban cigar, whatever. But I remember looking like, I can't find cigars around here. This was just in 2019. I think it was May of 2019. And we finally, I don't know if somebody pointed me in the direction or I was looking around, and there was a little wine shop not far from the Arch.
Yeah.
And there was
Ricardo.
They sold some cigars in there, and we found, I don't know if it was a Cuban. I don't remember what I smoked, to be honest with you, that day. But then we obviously couldn't smoke there because it was a wine shop. But we went over to El Barrio. And they have, it's kind of like a little food court for bars, I guess the best way to say it. And we went to the rooftop and we grabbed a drink, and I was able to enjoy my cigar there. By the way, it's cool because when you're enjoying your cigar there, you're on a rooftop, and you basically, every building in Antigua is like 2 stories or less. So
yes.
you get a nice view, maybe the volcano in the background, things like that. So that was. I did not discover you. I don't know if you had a location. Like, you obviously had a location, but I didn't discover you then. And I should actually mention, I was back here living in Guatemala, starting my teaching opportunity at the Universidad Francisco Marroquín in March of 2021. So Guatemala's sort of starting to come out of the pandemic a bit. And in April, my friend Bob Rubin came to visit. He was the first person that came to visit me while I was living here. And we went to Guatemala. We were in Guatemala City for, I think, the first 2 nights, came to Antigua the final night of his trip. And my friend Lisa Hanko, she had told me at some point, because she knew I liked cigars, there's this place, I know the owners, Uwe and Lyne, and it's called Antigua Cigars. And I was like, really? I'd never seen this place. And so I finally found it. And it's actually funny because right before Bob and I came here, we went to Cayuba Farms. And I had been to Cayuba Farms once before. And this was literally my second time. And I'd only been there like the month before, because actually Kyle was back in Guatemala, and our mutual friend Rosemary, and the three of us kind of all, hung out in Antigua one day, and maybe it was actually early April, and we went to Cayuba, and I thought it was cool. So a few weeks later when Bob came, actually he might have came in May, I said, let's go to this place, Cayuba Farms. I think it'll be cool. And lo and behold, we in some ways randomly, meet the owner, Alex.
Yes.
Alex comes up to our table, starts talking to us. He starts asking us how our food is, and I just got a sense that he might be part of management. And his English accent was great, and I said, "Are you the manager or something?" And he said, "Well, I actually found it on the owner." "Oh, okay." And "Wow, you speak really good English." And he said, "Well, I grew up in Guatemala, but my dad's from the U.S." So we start talking for 15 minutes, and by the way, I ended up way later having Alex on my podcast, so people can go back and watch his whole story. But 10, 15, we're talking, and it's funny, Bob's joking to Alex because I keep asking him more questions about this incredible place, Cayuba Farms. And Bob says, "You better be careful. Francisco will have a podcast with you, I said, "Actually, I would love to come back here and do a podcast." But Bob starts asking him some questions about his family. "Oh, where do your parents do?" And he said his dad had this business where he built these wooden doors.
Doors, windows.
And all of a sudden, a little light bulb went off in Bob's head, and Bob goes, "Is your last name Kronick?" He goes, "Yes." And I even go, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Your dad's name was Paul, right?" "Yes." He goes, "Yeah, he used to be a client of mine for like 20 years. Bob's in wealth management, finance, all this stuff." So he said, when you said the wooden doors things, all of a sudden I was like, I know a guy that makes wooden doors. And oh my gosh, Bob forgot that he actually knew somebody that was in Guatemala. He just didn't put it together. So funny enough. But anyway, so we seem to have this little quick bond with Alex, which prompted me to say to him, "Alex, I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Guatemala. Do you smoke cigars?" And he goes, "No, I don't actually." I said, "Oh, too bad, because we're going to go down the street here soon, and we're going to go find this place called Antigua Cigars." He goes, "Oh, I know the owners. In fact, the first greenhouse I had here, they actually gave me the greenhouse, and it was a whole long story. But anyway, so it's funny because an hour or two later, Bob and I leave Cayuba Farms. This was literally our next stop. We come here. Lissa Honkel had, I think, given Lynn the heads up that some friends of hers were going to be coming. So we walk in here being very welcome, because you guys also maybe knew that there was somebody that was being sent your way. So we had a fantastic time with you. The very first time that we came here, you just feel like home. And look at this place. If you're watching this on YouTube, it looks like a living room. It's really, really fantastic. But I say all that because finally I found this place. And then now I have a home here in Antigua, and also over cigars.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, like you said, living room, and that was in the other location as well, because the first 5 years we were open from noon until 8 at night, every day, 365 days.
Wow.
And Lynn and I, we ran it. We were there every day for the first 5 years.
So I also come in here for the first time, and I go on the other side of this wall is their humidor, and you could just come in and buy a cigar and leave, or you could come in and stay here, smoke a cigar. And I thought, what cigar am I going to smoke? And I saw that you had a locally branded cigar, Antigua Cigars, which I'm smoking right now. And I'm sitting right over there on the other side there on the couch, and you're sitting here, and I don't know if Lynn was over there or whatever, and Bob's here. And I'm about halfway through this cigar, which, by the way, is a fantastic price. And, I really didn't know what to expect, because they've got some Rocky Patels, they've got some Plasencias, they've got, some things. But I think I literally remember about halfway through the cigar looking right over at Uwe and going, "This is a fantastic cigar." Can you tell us a little bit about where, I think I'm smoking the Maduro here.
Yep.
Where are your cigars made? What kind of cigars do you have, and where are they made?
Well, to tell you about how it all came about was our house brand was about 15 years ago or something. Once we were a few years in business, we kind of noticed the cigar culture is not very big in Guatemala. And it was more the establishment that came and bought some of the local, but majority was tourist. Our business was tourist because before the pandemic, Antigua is the most visited spot in Central America. We had over 1 million tourists every year as an individual spot. Tikal is number 2, and the Panama Canal is number 3. As a country, it's Costa Rica. As a total country, they have more the ecological interest and I must say, little nicer beaches than us. And so, anyways, through that, we thought, well, there's an upcoming younger crowd, and why don't we educate them more on cigars? And so, with our purchasing trips to Honduras and Nicaragua, we always hopped in the truck, had a friend that ran the store for that time, our friend George, and we went for a week or 2 weeks and learned more about the fields, the making, and everything else. So that's like with everybody who has a passion, and if you have the passion, you want to know all about it, all the details and all the things, how it's made, how it's grown, what the differences are. And then I learned about the differences of tobacco. And because we have a free trade zone, C4, which is Nicaragua, Honduras, Salvador, and Guatemala, we don't pay duties amongst each other. So we have a very substantial advantage financially on purchasing cigars straight from the factory. While in many other areas of the world it goes through 4 or 5 distribution hands and the whole system, which raises the price so much. And their advertising budgets and we have none of that. I said, I can produce a cigar and sell a cigar. My first cigars I sold for 10 quetzales, which is $1.20, $1.40, depending on the exchange rate. And I found out that actually even the branded cigars are not that much more expensive to make. The tobacco is similar, but there's aging processes involved. Some age the tobacco for many years, roll the cigar, age the cigars, all of that added cost to the main brands and to specialty, and that warranted, and the distribution cost warrants their prices. But I wanted that I have a cigar available for anybody who would like to start and try. And so I made various sizes. I made a very small Personita and a Corona and a Robusto. I made different sizes, and I made them or I didn't make them, but I choose those tobaccos that are mild for a beginner, that it's not offensive, not too much strength in the cigar, and having different cuppas. The cuppa of the cigar gives between 15 to 35% of the flavor of the cigar, that little leaf on the outside. Many people don't realize that. And so it has an influence on the taste of the cigars. The filler could be the same, but if I take a Corojo leaf or a Connecticut leaf or a Pennsylvania broadleaf, Ecuadorian sun-grown, and all the different types of tobaccos with different taste, or San Andres, which has sweetness in the tobacco. And so we made different cuppas and different sizes at prices from $1.20 to $3. And it started more of the local business too. And actually, the tourism really enjoyed our choice of blending. Like the cigar that you smoke is from Nicaragua. It's a Maduro capa, and it's from one farm that grows their own tobacco, and it's in the Condega Valley, which is just outside of Esteli in Nicaragua. It's a family business. They have about 60 rollers. If, as comparison, the Rocky Patel in Dunlea has 600 rollers.
That's amazing. So a couple things you said there for those listening, a little cigar education. So it's interesting too with cigars, other than your branded wrapper on the cigar, which at some point when we burn enough of the cigar, we take the wrapper off, right? But the entire cigar, including the outside of the cigar, is tobacco leaf. That's why you say like that outside leaf is what gives, you said 10 or 15% of the flavor.
The cuppa.
Yeah. What do you call that? The cuppa?
Or you in English it's in English we call it the wrapper.
The wrapper. Oh, the wrapper. Yeah.
The cigar has three construction components: the filler, which is the tripa, and then the binder, which is the capote, and the cuppa.
Yeah, so the entire thing is natural. And that's, that also I think what distinguishes a lot. Well, that's also what distinguishes a lot from a cigarette, right? Too, other than the fact how you smoke it, you don't inhale cigars.
Absolutely.
And it's not, and a cigar
no chemicals added.
No chemicals added. It's all totally natural tobacco. The other thing you mentioned when you were talking about Nicaragua, so for example, like Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic probably have the best cigars in the world today. Yeah. Cuba has also been traditionally known, of course, as a great place for cigars. People question, the quality today, or not just the quality, but the quality and the price combined, whether it's worth it. But yeah, I think some of my favorite cigars now are Nicaraguan, and I mean, I've probably smoked more Antigua branded cigars than maybe any cigar now in my life. I will be leaving after this interview is recorded. I'm about 24 hours away from going back to Florida. And you guys all know what I do before I go back to Florida. I load up on your cigars. And then usually when I get down to just a couple or one, I send Linda text with a picture. Only got a couple left. So anyway, this is why I have to keep coming back to Guatemala just to load up on these cigars. There's nothing like Cuba, for example. It's hard. We can't find Cuban cigars are not sold in the United States. You can get them from some people here and there, but obviously because of the embargo issues and things like that. So, but they do allow Cubans to transport now. Like if you're on a cruise or you're traveling to Cuba somehow, or you're traveling to some other place that sells Cuban cigars, you can buy them and you can take a certain limited amount back to the United States as long as you're not selling them just for personal use. That actually is kind of new in the last 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. But I gotta say, as much as my family's heritage is from Cuba, my dad's from Cuba. My grandfather actually was born and raised in the Pinar del Rio area of Cuba, and I don't get the cigar smoking from them because my dad doesn't smoke or anything. My grandfather smoked mostly a pipe and even cigarettes and cigars, but not really in my adult life with him because he didn't smoke at that point, and he has since passed away about 12, 13 years ago now. So. But it is funny that the heritages go back. Pinar del Rio is one of the best tobacco growing areas in the world for a lot of different reasons. But the Cuban cigars today are very, very pricey to get, and I think there's also some question about the quality, but especially I think the bigger thing is the quality has gone up in the DR and Nicaragua. And a lot of those old Cuban families went to those places.
And let's not forget Honduras.
And Honduras,
Honduras has a large industry in the Dunlea area.
And some of your cigars that are Antigua cigars come from Honduras too,
yeah,
right?
We have a Honduran one and a Nicaraguan one, and we differentiate between a green ring and a red ring. A red ring is Nicaragua, green ring is fabricated in Honduras.
Oh, see, even I'm learning here. So this is great. So when you go in that humidor here at Antigua Cigars, you'll find the differences. And then the other thing you mentioned was, so a lot of these really great cigar, like a lot of Rocky Patels come from Honduras and Nicaragua?
Yeah.
Both, yeah. They have factories in both places.
Plasencias in Nicaragua.
But Plasencia is the largest tobacco grower. their family is in the tobacco business for 5 generations. And the first 3 generations were in Cuba. For instance, there's a cigar that they brought out just recently, and they call it Cosecha 149. And that harvest, cosecha means harvest, that harvest, the 149th harvest of that family was in 2014.
Wow.
So you can count back when they started in the 1800s. And Nestor Plasencia, as the family farms were confiscated in
Cuba.
in 60, he took some seeds and went over to Nicaragua. And today he is the largest private tobacco grower in the world. More than 30,000 acres.
And at
in
some
5
point,
countries.
So they went there in the 60s, and at some point, was it in the 80s that they also had their farms confiscated in Nicaragua?
Well, they had problems at that time.
Problems.
It was the Sandinistas, yes.
Yeah.
That's actually when he moved from Nicaragua and bought land in Honduras. And in the Hamastran Valley, he owns a lot of land. And our house brand has actually Hamastran tobacco in there. It's Plasencia tobacco in there, in my house brand.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so anyways, that family is great. And even Nestor, as he started out, was only tobacco grower. And then they started over the time building factories. They had 4 factories, but they leased them out. And one of the biggest leaser was Rocky Patel. He started his whole business in one of the Plasencia factories and still leases that factory. All the edges are made there, and all the Honduran production is made there. It employs about 1,200 people in there. And they roll 1 million cigars a month.
1 million cigars a month just in one. This is Rocky?
Rocky, yeah.
Rocky Patel.
Yeah.
So I was just, I spent a lot of time when I'm in Guatemala City at the Coranto Club.
Oh, yeah.
Which is our friend Alex
And
Puigpont.
Alex.
Yeah, and Alex had him on the podcast as well. I want to say it was episode 102 or somewhere around there last year. But just recently, in the last couple months, he went up to the Oscar Villarares factory in Honduras and also told me some stories of how many people are working there as well. It's incredible.
Yes. Yeah. A small new company that grew up and is obviously making a fantastic cigar. Leaf by Oscar is known now in many countries and widely distributed in the United States.
Yeah, and I believe their story is also, was it Rocky Patel that I think Oscar
used, as Rocky wanted to go into the cigar business, he hooked up with Plasencia and learned more about the industry and actually moved there. And Rocky spent tons of time there because he wanted to roll and blend his own cigars. He wanted to understand the whole industry. And he didn't speak Spanish. And Oscar was his driver, personal driver and translator for many years. And then he grew up further in the system, and Rocky supported him further, and eventually he started his own little company.
Yeah, what an entrepreneurial story that is. I mean, when you are the driver for Rocky Patel and the translator, and really learned firsthand from Rocky, and also what a great, this is the other thing I love about entrepreneurs, is the entrepreneurs that are willing to share their lessons, their knowledge, to think about how Rocky learned from Plasencia about cigars, then grew this huge cigar business, and then Rocky taught others. I'm sure there are others besides Oscar out there too.
There are others. There's many Cubans that were displaced by having their properties confiscated. Dominican Republic.
Fuente, yeah.
Yeah,
Huge.
Fuente, huge. Corillo. In Nicaragua, there's many, like there's the other families that established there, like the Olivar, and they grow tobacco and make cigars, and there's many ex-Cubans that started all of this.
So just the other day when I was at the Coranto Club, Alex was showing me a graphic of the cigar products. So 35% of all cigars are made in the Dominican Republic. They're number one right now. Nicaragua was number two. I want to say it was like 15%, or so. I might be getting that off.
I think they're higher.
Maybe 20. Yeah, they're maybe 20. But those were the top two. Then it went down. Maybe Cuba was 3. And then, actually funny, there was Germany and Poland. And I said, well, hold on a second. Tobacco's not grown there, but they must be producing the cigars there.
Germany and Holland, they import a lot of tobacco from Brazil, out of the Salvador region. It's a huge region of tobacco, and it was always known. You go back to the early 1900s, tobacco was imported in Europe because cigars were rolled in Denmark, in Germany, and in France, in Spain. The industry used to always import their tobacco. And in my early years in Germany, I remember my grandfather, he smoked cigars, and it was only you want a Sumatran or you want in Brazil. It was a Sumatran or Brazil. The Sumatran was the light leaf and the Brazil was the dark leaf, and that was it. And they didn't make distinction of the label of the company even, And so the industry in Europe is huge. And actually, when you look into the financial area of the tobacco industry, there are some in Dominican private, and there are some private one, but a very, very large one is Scandinavian tobacco, and they are connected with Swedish Match. They own so many factories that people don't even know of that they are the owner of, and the distribution of in Europe.
That's interesting. The other cool thing about the cigar industry is you see a lot of the collaborations. So. Maybe about 6 months ago, I was in Tampa, Florida, and it's actually part of Tampa is called Ybor City, and Ybor City has a really great cigar history, mostly of Cubans coming and rolling tobacco in the late 1800s, and it's actually named after a Spaniard, Don Vicente Ybor, who YBOR, who created the company town in a sense. And he was a Spaniard who had been in Cuba, and then he took his first factory to in the U.S. to Key West, and there was a lot of factories in Key West in the late 1800s, and then went to Ybor City.
That picture up there is one of the original covers of a cigar box out of Key West.
Oh,
the
cool,
Key West Cigar Company.
Yeah, Key West had a huge industry, and in cigars in the late 1800s. Mostly it was to avoid tariffs. So they would send the U.S. tariffs at the time on cigars was very high on the finished cigar.
Yeah, not on tobacco.
But not on the tobacco. So they would take the Cuban tobacco and they would ship it to Key West, 90 miles away, and then they had all these all the rollers that would roll the cigars. And then when they had some labor issues there, they moved to some moved to the Tampa area, Ybor City. So I say that because I was just touring a factory. It's the last cigar factory in Tampa, and it's the J.C. Newman Company.
Yeah.
But let's not be. It's actually not a Cuban family. It's actually a Jewish family from Ohio.
Yes.
And they moved down there, I think, in the early 1900s somewhere, maybe 1930s or something. And they told me, I believe, at least on the scale, there may be some small little factories where people roll cigars, but they said not only are we the last kind of large-scale cigar factory in the in Tampa, but also in the U.S. There's a lot of reasons for that. Labor issues. It's less expensive to and also it's, there's no tobacco fields. There's a few in Florida here and there, but nothing like in the Caribbean or in Central America. So anyway, but they do a collaboration with Fuente, J.C. Newman, and in fact they told me that if you are smoking a Fuente cigar in the United States, it has likely first been stored at their factory in Tampa.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then a lot of these companies now are doing, I think it was the Padron family and the Fuente family do a collaboration now.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
So it's kind of cool to see entrepreneurs working together, collaborating, helping each other grow. The cigar, especially I think, the tobacco industry is really banded together. There's obviously lots of regulations on tobacco. A lot of regulators and policymakers get cigarettes and cigars confused, and then there's this new e-cigarette and all these sorts of things where, you know, they're the flavored, what do you call it? The it's kind of like an e-cigarette. What do they call it? The vaping,
Oh,
right?
terrible.
So they're trying to cut down on young people vaping so much. So they, in the U.S. recently, they raised the age from 18 to 21 for all tobacco products, which most cigar store owners and lounge owners that I meet in the U.S., I asked them about that. They obviously weren't happy about it because they don't want any new regulations on their industry, but they also kind of said, you know, there's very few people between the ages of 18 and 20 that are actually smoking cigars, so it's
That's
not really
true. That's
part
true.
of our industry as it is. But going back, I want to just talk Antigua Cigars. You're here. Antigua itself attracts a lot of expats.
Yes.
So people from the U.S., Canada, Europe, maybe beyond, and you have a membership here as well. You have a club that people can be a part of. Can you tell us two-part question? One, what's it like living here as an expat, I guess you could say, and the kind of other people from other places that you meet, the other kind of businesses that some of these people own, and then secondly, the kind of club members you attract.
Well, the whole thing about the club was that when we started the business, Uwe and I worked at it 365 days a week. 365 days a year.
Felt like 365 days a week, I bet.
Exactly. and
felt like it.
yeah, exactly. About 12 hours a day. And we had to create an ambiance where we would be comfortable in to smoke our cigars. And then by ricochet, we seduced the clientele as well to do that, sit with us and smoke. But fast forward, the government of Guatemala introduced in 2007, I believe it was, a non-smoking laws. So we had to adapt, and we created a private environment to smoke. So we just moved the living room.
Can you say, what do you mean by non-smoking laws? What does that mean?
It means that you cannot smoke in a public area that is sort of enclosed. If you are inside a garden that is public, you couldn't smoke there. If you are on a terrace that is public, in theory, you can't smoke there. So we had to create a different legal structure that allowed us to have our client tried our product and then leave with more product. That
So
was
in
the
a
idea.
sense, creating a private club.
Yes, we created the private club, membership club, and now because the 50% of our business is tourism, we have to offer a daily membership. So they buy their membership, they sit here, they smoke their cigars, and they leave. The private club thing is not very expensive, 900 Q, it's about $120 a year for somebody to have their little card in their wallet. They are a member of Antigua Cigar Club. And that's what we do, and you have alcohol, and it's a nice ambiance. It's feutré, they say in French.
And most of your so you have the daily members, which are mostly tourists.
Yes.
That come here, and then the people who are your
City people
and locals.
Yeah.
from the city.
Oh, people from Guatemala City.
Yeah.
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 And so they're Guatemalans who live in the city and travel to Antigua for a weekend or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the people who are your annual members, who are most of them?
Most of them are foreigners that live here. Do we have? Yeah, we have some Guatemalans club members, but mostly foreigners, and we have some foreigners that don't live here and they still have their membership just because they want to be a member of the club. It's a small community. There's about 30 of us, and we have events every month, and we have promotion, and that's how the family grew. Because we're often together, but the place is not big enough to host everybody at once, so we go out for events.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's a great place
To network.
Yeah, a great place to network.
Yes.
I've come in here. Really, you come into a cigar lounge to smoke a cigar.
Yeah.
But you never know who you're going to meet at a cigar
Yes.
lounge.
Yes.
Whether it's the owners like you, whether it's just any. I mean, I've met, and it's funny because I've never been in Antigua full time. I usually just am one of the people that come in from the city,
Yeah.
Or when I'm traveling here on a trip, and yet so many times I come in here and I see a lot of familiar faces.
Yeah.
That maybe the last time I saw them was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's great to see a lot of those same people, and it's cool that Antigua attracts so many people from around the world
Yeah.
that live here.
Yeah.
And I always say it's a small place, very the whole city mostly is walkable.
Yeah.
And yet you can come and there's so many like restaurants, right? Our friends down the street at Como, a Belgian style restaurant.
Yeah.
We have Italian restaurants, French restaurants, German restaurants. It's Chinese. I mean, you get everything in Antigua. For such a small place, it's just incredible.
Yeah, because Antigua is surrounded by coffee thinkers. There's really not much expansion. And we have 14 aldeas, small villages, around Antigua that belong to the structure of Antigua. We live in the next village in San Pedro Las Huertas. And many expats live more in the villages. We are estimating it's about 4,000 in and around Antigua. And a large number of them are part-timers that the children went out, they on their own, they had a house in Boston, they sold their house in Boston, they bought one down here for a portion of the money they got there, and they kept the cottage. And so in the summer they go back for a few months to their cottage. They are 6 months usually. So I guess it also has to do with the insurances and all of that. And that's what many do. Many do are part-timers here for half a year.
Yeah, well, once you come to Antigua and you spend any time here, you really just don't want to leave. It's incredible. Yes. And so I want to ask you just a couple last questions here. One is, somebody might be watching this and go, I can't believe a guy from Germany/Canada and a woman from Canada have now moved to Guatemala, and you were in your 50s, Uwe, when you started here, and that was what, around 2004, 5?
2004.
2004.
Yeah, we moved here,
and so to be able to come here and move and spend maybe the rest of your life here. You were almost retirement years, but this was kind of like a new business opportunity for you. Yeah. But what are some of the what are some of the changes you've seen, or some of the just perspectives that you have of Guatemala over those last 17 years here?
The technology has changed the face of Guatemala very much so. The cell phone, the internet. Even though coming from the north, we were accustomed to all of this, here it was later that it got moving. I remember spending hours at the bank in line to either do a withdrawal or deposit. So the bank machine came in, and the internet and all of those things. And the pandemic gave all of this a big push. There's a lot of government stuff that you can do online now. So it is changing fast. But it remains that the country, lack of education, lack of structure, it's still, you live in a third world country with a lot of facility with the internet. Antigua is very pristine, and it's the best place probably in Guatemala. It's also the most expensive one, but from somebody from North America, this is not expensive. Mm-hmm. So the people are amazing. It's fun to live here. The weather is extraordinary. But one thing I wanted to say, we have made new friends recently. They're both Guatemalans. They lived in the U.S., one in L.A., the other one in Texas. They were married, had a life, separated, and remarried together and decided to move here. So we spend time with them, and they're looking at us like, really? We're Guatemalans. We're coming home. What are you doing here? And why do you like it so much? And it was really a change of pace, a change of lifestyle. As you know, I was in the fashion industry. Consumption was my thing. And when you come here, at the beginning especially, it was so difficult to consume. You couldn't get anything, or if you wanted to get something, you could probably find it. But how long it will take you, and how much would you have to pay for it? So you become less and less needy. You consume less. You live better. You eat better. All kinds of things have influenced and made our life better here because of that. It's slow pace. And the Guatemalans, they have little and they share it with you. They're always smiling. They're happy in their adversity. And that's a lesson in life. It makes us better people because we're not as forceful, I would say, because demanding, forceful, yeah. It's a very much a nicer life here.
Yeah, because when you say that's interesting, because a lot of people, maybe in the U.S. or Canada, where it's maybe the most advanced places, not just technology, like you said, consumption, whatever,
ease
of life, comfort of life, lots of comfort,
convenience.
But what you kind of just described is there's a different side, a different mentality of comfort of life.
Yes.
And when you're not in that kind of rat race, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah.
Necessarily.
There's always mañana. In Latin country, mañana is a big word. It means tomorrow, but it's not tomorrow. It's whenever I get to it, you'll get it. And you learn to live with that, and nothing is an emergency. It's not because I got your email today that I will respond in 20 minutes. This is not a microwave. And all of that makes your life much more cool, I would say.
Well, it's funny because I run some group trips.
Yeah.
And when you're running, and I'm a very much a planner mindset.
Yeah.
And so when you're running, you've got an itinerary, you got places you need to go, you got people you need to meet, you got only so much time when you've got people visiting here for 7 or 10 days.
Uh-huh.
And I've even noticed when I'm telling the driver, like, oh, we gotta calm down, Francisco.
Yeah.
Relax.
Yeah.
And it's
we'll get there.
Yeah. Because I'm always thinking about, we got to go to that next thing. Someone's waiting for us over here, whatever. I got to get the group moving, But it is kind of funny. You see that difference in mindset, in the mentality of, and it's not. Some people could look at it a different way and say, well, they're not
efficient.
They're not efficient. They're not serious. They're not punctual. But you can just look at it. It's actually just a different mentality.
Yes.
Of the way you look at life. Also, something you said, kind of made me think about just in the last 2 weeks. Oh.
Uwe will take over.
Yeah, so Uwe will take over. In the last couple weeks, I had some friends come here to Guatemala. I took them to Lake Atitlan, and they loved it. And it was great. And I had to come back to the city, and they stayed one more extra day in Lake Atitlan before they went to Antigua. But I went. I said, I helped them find a way for them to get to Antigua. But I came on a shuttle from Lake Atitlan to Antigua, and then I switched shuttles and went from Antigua to the city. And I was on the shuttle with just 3 people, 3 other tourists, I guess you could say, that were leaving Lake Atitlan. 2 were these 2 young girls from New York, and they were probably in their early to mid-20s, and they just loved Guatemala. I think it was their first time. They had come to Antigua, they went to Lake Atitlan, they did a volcano hike, and they were just talking about how much they loved Guatemala. And particularly, this is something I hear from everybody that I've brought, everybody I've met, kind of something you said, as much as the beautiful landscapes that are here, as much as all the great natural beauty Guatemala has to offer, people always say one common thing: the people. They love the Guatemalan people. And so the girls were talking about that, and these 2 girls actually spent a lot of time in Israel too. And so they were telling me about their experiences in Israel. We exchanged some great stories. There was somebody else on the shuttle with us, and he was actually a young adult Guatemalan man. He was, I don't know, probably 25 or 28 or something like that. And he actually grew up in Antigua, and he was taking the shuttle. He just went to Lake Atitlan for a fun weekend in Lake Atitlan as well. Was coming back on the shuttle by himself, and you could tell he lived a pretty maybe middle class lifestyle here. He didn't come from any adverse situations from anything I could tell. Just sort of a normal middle class lifestyle. He's done. He was being a tour guide recently in Costa Rica. So he found a job. So he had this kind of interest in life. But as he heard us talking about Guatemala and the Guatemalan people, he chimed in and he said, "You know, a lot of people here have a tough life, but there's one thing: they have so much hope that things are going to get better. They always have hope that things are going to get better." And I think that's kind of I was struck by that because I thought, I think that's right based on my experience. It's like because you see people in some of these little villages that are so poor, and they don't have much, but they're so happy to see you.
Yes,
they're so happy. They have such joy and smile on their faces. And when I heard this guy say, they have a tough life here. We were commenting about how hard of workers Guatemalans are.
Yeah.
Any Guatemalan you've ever encountered, whether it's been in Florida or here or wherever. But he said, they always have so much hope that things are going to be better.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great.
And on that note, I always said to Uwe, I think that what will change Guatemala is foreigners. It's Guatemalans that live abroad come back. And I think they can change their country. And Francisco was introduced to a guy that walked into this cigar shop way back when. And I said, "Oh my God, he's so good looking and he's so well dressed." So he sat down, we had a talk. And his name is Benjamin Fossen. And he says to me, "I'm an adoptee and I'm coming back to help Guatemala." I said, "Where were you? I've been waiting for you. I want this to happen because there is so much opportunity here. They have so little help. And somebody like him could really make a difference in this country. And it will happen. I can sense it."
Yeah, and it's funny, I meet so many people here at Antigua Cigars. It's just fascinating. And in December of this past year, I was here, and the young man you're talking about was not here, but you told me about him.
Yes.
And so you connected us, and we've since met, and we're going to the next episode of this podcast will feature him right here at Antigua Cigars. And so anyway, we'll hear Ben Fossen's story on the next episode. But this has been such a great place to just honestly, I come here for you two now as well. And even there's been times I've been in Antigua where maybe you were traveling on vacation or something, and
He would send me WhatsApp. "We're on the boat. I'm buying off the cigars."
Yeah, and sometimes this seat is empty, and I say, "I can't sit there. That's Uwe's seat." Right now, if this place is full, someone's going to sit there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Uwe's seat. I'm not going to sit there. But it was odd the first time I came here. I think it was even next 2 times I had come here, and you guys weren't here.
Yeah.
Something felt empty about the place, but you guys bring a lot of joy to me and to many people here in Antigua, to our friend Bob Rubin, who loves here. And Bob made an amazing connection the first time we were here.
Oh, yeah.
With,
that was precious.
Yeah, with a little boy here that so and his family. So it was a great time here. It's always a great time here at Antigua Cigars. And so I just wanted to say thank you. And if you guys are ever in Antigua, especially for cigar smokers, you got to come by Antigua Cigars and say hello to Uwe and Lynn. And I always bring back so many of their cigars. One of the reasons I also run out of your cigars so much.
You give them away.
I do give them away, and so I don't smoke them all, but I do smoke most of them. And sometimes also, Bob sends me, hey, pick up some Antigua cigars for me. So my suitcase is loaded, and luckily that nobody ever thinks there's something illegal. They're just cigars, because I would be sad if they were confiscated somehow. But it's great, and it's always great to be here. I feel like I was going to ask you one more question. Let me see. We talked about the club members. We talked about your perception of Guatemala, and I know I had one more question for you, and I hinted at it a little while ago, but I mentioned the expats. So there's so many foreigners like yourself that open businesses here in Guatemala, and a lot of them are restaurants. A lot of your cigars, and maybe there's some other things. Alex's father, Cayoba Doors, he has a huge manufacturing facility that he employs hundreds of Guatemalans to make these amazing wooden doors, very artisan craft. But what would you say? I mean, it's so the one thing I asked you was about moving here. And maybe a lot of people retire here, and I think a lot of your club members are retirees that they're just retired. They probably don't do any work. Maybe they get involved with a charity or something like that. But But what would you say about people who move here and start a business here? That's even something more incredible. Some of them late in their life, but what is the environment here for people who maybe want to move here and start a business?
Well, it's not complicated. It takes time to the laws are very similar, like in the countries up north, like in our countries, and it's all very well regulated. To open up a company, you contact a lawyer, and it takes about $1,500, and you have a company. And the time frame can be anywhere from 2 to 5 months, and you're in business. Like, and there are no great obstacles. Like, and the same as purchase of properties. It's possible, and there's a catastrophe office, and it's all very organized and controlled.
And so I imagine, and if this is too personal, let me know. But you own some real estate here as well, right? Because you have a home.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you rent this space or do you own this space?
This space is rented.
This place is rented. So, Lynn, I think this is not your primary job because you're here. You're running Antigua Cigars a lot, but I feel like you do help some people with real estate as well if they want.
Yeah, well, I'm not a realtor, but what I have discovered is that there are elderly people that have family that don't live here, and they're at the end of their lives, and there's all kinds of things that happens. The kids come here, they don't speak the language, and they have to figure out the estate and all of that. So I've been helping about 3 or 4 families about the passing on of these things. So I have a friend lawyer that helped us a lot with making sure that if something happens to us, our children can get the stuff without too much issues. So I'm more of a facilitator, which had to do with what I was doing in Canada as well when I was a lobbyist, the same type of things. You just look at the laws, you look at what the opportunities are, and how do these children can get this and work it out. And being in business allowed me to discover a lot of how things functions here. Mm-hmm. So I was able to be of good what's the word in English? Bon conseil. To help them out, figure it out.
Yeah.
To do
kind
those
of an advisor
things.
Type.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what I do.
And the other thing is people might say, how can people, especially the retirees I mentioned, come here when the United States or Canada or whatever seem, at least by perception, to have such great medical care. When you're in your elder age, a lot of times you want to be close to hospitals and places you can get good doctor. How is the healthcare here that people can get when they need it?
Well, we're Canadians, so we have social health care back home, but we feel that the healthcare we can get here is as good as what we can get in Canada. Obviously, we pay for it. You pay as you go. We haven't paid insurance for the last 20 years, so we have accumulated a safety net for when we need insurance, when we need care. But the other thing also is when you live here, your level of stress go down. What you eat, lo que comes is better. So you have a better life, so you're less susceptible to being sick. Therefore, you don't have to worry so much about the healthcare. But obviously, if you do it late in years, you might already have issues. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of finding out how you can work it out with that. But the life is so much better. We have people helping us at the house. We have help. It's easy to buy help, and you can have a good life. We have common friends, you and I, Francisco, where the father and the mother were in the health crisis, and the daughter took care of them with a team and it all worked out. And for them, it was something like $3,000 a month to have them taken care of all the time. If she would have been in Boston, where her family was from, was more in the vicinity of $15,000. So their money went further here, and they had all the specialists they needed to be taken care at home and die at home, and all of those things that you have here, and the climate, and it's easy for them to be inside, outside, and they have a better lifestyle than one of those home for elderly.
Yeah, well, those are all. That's a really great way to do it. So I'm going to end this podcast with a couple of just last fun questions about cigars. Lynn, you mentioned already your first cigar experience in Havana.
Yes.
Learning from a roller. What a cool first cigar experience.
I mean, yeah, it gets you hooked for life.
Yeah. Uwe, how did you first get into cigars?
Well, I did a lot of sports, and I didn't smoke much in Germany at all. And when I was in Canada and I got a little bit established and I had a little bit of disposable income, I had a friend who was smoking cigars, and he said, and I never liked cigarettes, I never smoked cigarettes, and I used to smoke a pipe because in engineering school it was very cool in 1968 to smoke a pipe, you know. So, and well, and through him, we started. I went with him, and so a friend introduced me to that, and got hooked.
Okay, last question. And I know you have lots of friends in the cigar industry, so I hope we're not hurting anyone's feelings. But I want to know, other than Antigua Cigars, what is your go-to cigar?
Well, the really go-to cigar is always my house brand.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to advertise it, but because
Okay, so other than your house brand,
because of the price,
yeah,
and
same here.
and we, our club members, to develop those, we had a group of guys. Like I once, 3 club members. Hey, let's go for a week to Honduras. Let's make 2 new cigars, and jump in the truck and drive to Honduras, pick the factory, and sit there, and they blend different things for us, and we smoked, and then everybody has a little sheet and said, okay, this one was a little too strong, or this was this, and this, and then we decided that's it. That's how that Nicaraguan came all about.
Yeah, well, it's really great. So, okay, I got a follow-up to that. What's the cigar that you really like, that you kind of, when you splurge and you go outside your house brand, that you really, really like?
What I really like? At the moment, it changes.
Yeah, it changes, sure.
But at the moment, it's the 149 from Plasencia.
Nice. 149 from Plasencia.
I would like to add that when we started the business, we got in the truck, we had $5,000 in our pocket, and we went to Nicaragua. Our first encounter was with Nestor Plasencia, the kingpin of cigars in Nicaragua. So we are religiously tied to the family. We know them. We like them. They're good people. They have helped us maintain our business through thick and thin. The same for Rocky Patel, his group, his people. These are friends. This is not a business relationship, and we've been at it for 20 years, and they have helped us make it. So obviously, we like those brands, but we had great experience with my father. We had great experience with A.J. Fernandez. We have great experience with Drew Estate. We know Oscar, Leaf by Oscar. We know Oscar personally. So all of them are part of our families, really.
That's amazing. Well, somebody always said, when you trying to figure out what is the best cigar, the answer to that is the one that you like to smoke the most.
Yes.
So there you go.
That's exactly.
Well, I like to smoke a lot of cigars here at Antigua Cigars at Antigua, Guatemala, and I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure to finally have one of our conversations recorded. So Lynn and Uwe, thank you so much for welcoming so many people, including myself, into your family here. Thanks for being Agents of Innovation, and thanks for being on the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And of course, for you listeners and viewers, like, subscribe, comment. We want to hear what you think about this. So thanks so much for listening and watching.